Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we sit down with everyday people who do extraordinary things. I am your host, Jerome Rand, here aboard the old Mighty Sparrow. This should be the third offshore account that was pre-uploaded before I left, way back around December 16th or so. By this time, if I take out my old calendar, we might be well into January at this point. And with any hope, I'm still floating around out on the ocean blue, but probably starting to make my way back towards the Caribbean or possibly even the East Coast. Who knows? I don't know. It's kind of weird to be recording these little intros and knowing that they're not going to be out for a number of weeks, and the plan is to go out and go sail. So I don't know, kind of a little bit of a game I'm playing with my brain. But in any event, today I have a recording that I did when I got back down here to TJ's, the biggest little boatyard in North Carolina. One of the guys that work at the yard, Rob, he and I have talked a lot about fishing, and more precisely scalloping. And, obviously one of my best buds up there in Maine, Murph, he's done his fair share, Heath as well, of scalloping on the old East Coast. And so it's always pretty interesting to sit down with people who make their living from the sea, and Rob is no exception to that rule. As you'll hear, he's been climbing around on these boats since he was just a little guy, and he spent a good portion of his life out there scraping the bottom. So we had some pretty good stories to tell. Fascinating stuff. It really is. It's one of the most difficult and most dangerous jobs that you can have, and Rob did it with... Not only did he do it just to do it, and obviously you get reimbursed for that, but you could tell Rob has an affinity for the ocean, and I think an affinity for hard work as well and doing a good job, and that's always pretty rare to find in people, and it's nice to talk to somebody who sees the value in doing a hard day's labor and knowing how that feels at the end of the day, so on and so forth. It's really it's pretty cool. It's nice to sort of sit down with a like-minded person in that respect and chat about some of that, and also just hear about his experiences out on the ocean and doing that sort of job and the ins and outs of it, getting a little more in depth into the world of scalloping on the East Coast, out by the Hudson Canyon and all the other places in between. So really enjoyed sitting down and talking with Rob, and hopefully when I get back here at some point, he and I are going to be able to sit down and we're going to go tit for tat on storm stories, because he's got plenty, I got plenty. We're going to just go back and forth and see if we can one-up each other left, right, and center. Should be a lot of fun. But Rob's always done a great job for Mighty Sparrow. He's done a great job here at the boatyard. Kind of, a big part of the heart and soul of a place like this. And as a fellow yard worker from my days up in Maine, I know how that job can be pretty physically demanding, but, you have to really have a certain mindset to be able to do it and do it well, and you got to be able to tackle pretty much anything and everything when it comes to a boat, and Rob definitely does that. And he does it with a smile on his face and a great attitude, which what else could you ask for? But really appreciate you spending a little bit of time aboard Mighty Sparrow, seeing how the old sailing half lives, and hopefully the listeners will enjoy my conversation with Rob. But before we start the show, like I always say, if you want to help support this podcast, I'm going to keep it quick. Check the links in the description of this episode. You're going to find the Patreon family, which you can join and help support this podcast and future adventures, plus some one-time donation links via PayPal and Venmo. We got the merch, the shirts, the books, the children's books, all that sort of stuff. And then sailingintoOblivion.com for any inquiries about having your old pal J-Rome spice up any sort of event, dinner, school, whatever you got. I have some pretty crazy stories to tell, and then also coaching and consulting. So check all that stuff out, but please, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for the support. I should be back on shore at some point soon with some fresh stories from the sea. But before we do that, please enjoy this conversation with Rob, the man on the scallop boat. Exactly. So it's just the audio.
Oh, okay.
And it's not live or anything like
right.
that. But
Well, I dressed up for this occasion.
dude, you look great. You look great, Rob. Thanks for coming
Gotcha.
on the show, man. This
Yeah,
is this is very cool. It's always it's always been a huge interest of mine, the offshore fishing, especially lobster, but moreover scalloping, because scalloping is like the most brutal work.
It's pretty brutal.
The labor, like Murph, my buddy Murph, shout out to him, friend of the show, up in Maine. He was a scalloper all the way down to, I don't know. He was down even further south than, maybe not further south than here, but like Jersey and all that sort of stuff.
It kind of dies off like off of Delaware. You know, that's where the scallop grounds kind of end up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because then the water's too warm down here for scallops. Like they kind of like the colder water.
Right.
Yeah,
and essentially, I mean, he kind of took me through a little bit of the day-to-day, like what you're doing on those boats. And I mean, because I'd ask him, I'd be like, what's harder, lobster or scallop? And he was like, oh, scalloping by far.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it is. How long did you do it for?
You know, I mean, I did it on and off throughout like 3 periods of my life, you know. My family were on the boats the earliest I can remember. I was climbing around on all the rusty scallop dredges down in Barnegat Lake, New Jersey is where mainly that my family fished out of, and some out of Point Pleasant Beach as well, where I'm from, you know.
Oh, okay.
So like I was climbing on dredges when I was like 5 years old, 7 years old.
Born into
trying
it,
to like fix the gear when they came in for gear work and stuff, squeezing links, you know, cutting them and whatnot. You know, I know a lot of people don't know what that even really means.
I don't know what that means exactly.
But, you know, the dredge is made out of a chain bag, you know, and it wears away as it drags along the bottom. So you have to, like, replace things.
Oh,
you know?
I know
it's
what
like, it's like giant chain mail.
Right.
You know, so, but anyway, you know, my family, okay, so my brother Richard was the captain on this one boat. My brother Mark was the mate. My dad was the cook. And my brother Greg was the engineer.
Jeez, family affair.
You know, Richard, the captain, and the mate stayed in the wheelhouse. And then my other 2 family members, you know, that was their additional duties. You know, my dad was cooking for the 2 crews. And then my brother Greg was engineer. He did all the oil changes or mid-sea ray core changes on generators and stuff like that. So oil changes at the dock and whatnot. But so they thought, I have a twin brother, so they thought it was a good idea to bring the twins out on a scallop trip. And like I was 13, so it was 88, 1988.
Oh, okay,
right?
nice.
So my brother Charlie, my mom didn't want us all on a boat in case it went down. There was nobody to carry on the name.
Right.
So my brother Charlie went first. And he, it was like back in the day, and that boat was built to be a processor. So it had freezing capabilities, like flash freezing and all that, and it had
steel
fish
hull.
Hold, steel hull, like 97 foot. It had capabilities to hold like 1,000 bags, which is like 40,000 pounds, you know, if you caught that much. But that boat has seen 900 bags, and it's seen 36,000 pretty easy. But
yeah, because each
it's a
bag,
real good trip.
if I remember,
it's
is
about
40
pounds.
45
pounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, 13 years old, my twin goes out. He came back. He failed like day one. He quit. He said, "Don't do it. You don't want to do it." And like I've always had a spirit of adventure, so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go.
Yeah.
You know. So I went, and admittedly, like day one, it was so hard, especially on a 13-year-old. Like I had to sit down for a bit, man. And
I can only imagine.
My first trip was 21 days up in George's Bank. You know, so, you know, and they didn't have closed areas back then, so it was probably slightly towards the winter time or something, and there was like a groundswell like crazy up there, because it's kind of shoaly in
George's
that area.
is nuts, or can be.
It's like shoaly in that area.
Yeah.
And, so...
the old cell phone. Everybody's been doing that. They're like, oh, shoot.
No, that's my supplier. But I can talk to him later. But Yeah, so 13 years old. I mean, like I said, immediately I sat down and I got back up. I was like, I'm not a quitter. I went back to work and I finished the trip out. 21 days, man. It was tough.
Jeez.
I wasn't pulling a full share, at that
Right,
age.
right,
They paid
right.
me for a quarter share. I think I made like $400. Like they weren't making the money that they are today.
Yeah.
Like a full share for 3 weeks was like, the guy, they probably really gypped me out of the money, but they paid me like $400 or $500
For the whole 21?
Yeah. So, but like the crew probably made like 4,000 or 5,000.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So that was 13. I did it. My summer breaks, I started doing a trip. The owners of the boat were okay with me going out on a trip, so I kind
Nice,
of really
okay.
loved it. That was my summer break, right? I at least made one trip. 14, I made a trip. 15, I made a trip. Come 16 years old, I made a decision to drop out of high school and go full-time fishing because my one brother, Mark, who was the mate, got offered a position as captain on another boat with a different owner.
Okay.
So my brother Mark hired me, and he hired me at full share.
Were you concerned at all working for your brother like that, or no?
No way, man.
Worked out
No,
good.
they're like my father. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They were
yeah.
like, we were just so tight. So then I left my brother Richard's boat, and then I went on to my brother Mark's boat at 16. 16, and I fished full time until I was like 19. And, I got involved with a girl. She told me I was gone too much. And she
Right.
because we would go out for 16 days, come back in for 2, turn around and do another 16 before we took any real time off. So it was like gone for a month. And back then, we had like 200 days out of the year you can fish permitted.
Yeah.
So we were just turning around fishing at the high season, which is pretty
Was it
much
like
from
winter time was
early
the break?
March through like summer's the best where like the meat swell up and all that, and you get better yield per bushel and all that technical stuff.
Yeah.
And we would fish through the winter time too, which let me tell you something, Northeast out in the middle of, 60
brutal.
miles offshore, and nor'easters are coming through. And, when you don't just see one day of waves, you see like the storm approach and it starts to build. Then you're through the storm like for a day or two,
Yeah.
and then you're waiting for the build to drop.
Dropping off,
So,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've seen some pretty crazy stuff out there. Like 16 years old, I might have been 17. We were in the middle of one of them storms, and it was steady 15 foot. And we were,
Where was this? Up in Georgia?
this was actually off of the Jersey Shore.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so we were like, if I can remember, we're probably off of Atlantic City or something like that, like 50, 60 miles.
Okay.
Kind of like part of the Hudson Canyon fishing area. It's called the Hudson Canyon area.
Yeah,
now.
that place is a hotbed down there.
Yeah,
of
right?
Everything.
So, oh yeah, for sure.
Tile
So,
fish, baby.
I mean, they call it the channel. There's lots of rocks and all that.
Yeah.
Like when you're dragging your.
Well, and it's just those. I mean, it is a canyon, so that
Yeah.
all the walls of it are just filled with all different life at different levels,
Oh,
right?
for sure, yeah. And then where we're dragging's like out there is probably 30 fathom deep or something like that. So you're going, that's deep.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's lots of rocks. So we're bringing up rocks and scallops and whatever else you catch.
Oh, geez.
So you got to pick through like anything from a cobble to a boulder, And sometimes the rocks are so big you got to sling them over the side with the winch, man, and drop them over.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, you're moving
Jeez.
stuff around. I mean,
Well, that's got to be because I know, isn't it where some of the scallop fleets that I've cut through up
Mm-hmm.
northeast of George's, right on the really close to the line.
Canadian line.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like that's really level. Like it's almost been like flattened by
It's-
so much scalloping.
No, it's just shoaly up there.
Is it still shoaly?
'cause there's like Nantucket area where the lightship is. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
Nantucket
yeah.
lightship. Well, it's a Nantucket lightship area. They call it like Area 1 now. And then they have George's Bank area, which they call like Area 2. It just
okay.
makes it easier to identify. Don't quote me on those, but that's how they identify the areas.
Oh,
now.
I'm quoting you.
Okay, you can. But, yeah, so it's like, it's shoal up in Nantucket. That's why they put the lightship out there, because it's so shoaly out there
Yeah,
that ships were running aground. So
I
it's
was
just like-
always terrified of that until I was on somebody else's boat and we zipped around through there.
and like George's Bank, it's still shallow. Like you're fishing 20 fathom, and that's kind of shallow for for scallop grounds. You know what I mean? So it's not flattened by dredges. You know, I know contrary to popular belief, and Ted Danson said that it's the equivalent of like using a bulldozer through a forest. It's really not.
Right.
Like my brother has had scientists on his boat and sent down like titanium cased cameras strapped to the dredge, doing turtle catch studies, just bycatch studies and stuff like that to see, and they count like what's dead that comes up and what's alive that comes up, and they kind of look at the tonnage. And it's really not a lot dead. I mean, surprisingly, you're dragging around like a 5-ton sled, not a lot comes up dead. I mean, you know, if the scallops came up crushed and dead, you wouldn't be able to cut them open, right?
Right. Yeah, no, true.
No, but I was getting that, like, when I was 16, I was out in one of them storms in the middle of wintertime, and it was terrible, man. You know, and I was standing on, they call it the doghouse, where you cut the scallops on the back of the boat.
Yeah.
On this boat, anyway.
And that faces aft, right?
Yeah. So I'm, like, standing there, and we just got done dumping the dredges out, and my brother's setting the gear back over, and I'm waiting for the wires to wind up and all this dangerous stuff to happen before I go back on deck, and
boat's moving.
So he's turning the boat, because you're on a tow where you're catching stuff. You turn around on that tow, because you tow for like 2 miles or more at 4 knots, right? And on that turn, we were side to for a little bit. A rogue wave came out of nowhere, man, and washed the boat. I mean, it was a rogue wave.
Yeah.
And
huge breaker.
I was afraid, man. And the boat leaned over, I don't know how many degrees, but I thought we were going over. And I held on, and then the water shed off the deck, and I was like gung ho after. I was like Captain Dan, dude, or Lieutenant Dan. I was like Lieutenant Dan, like, come on! I was like excited, bro. And that's actually what always had a sense of adventure, but I've done some crazy stuff in my life: skydiving, freaking dirt bike racing, offshore powerboat racing. It's like list goes on. But it was crazy, but I loved it, man. Really?
You're not clipped in or anything.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, you asked like how long I did it. So I had a period between 13, 14, 15, just a trip here and there. 16 to 19 was full time. A girl got me on land, and that's when I got into the marina industry. So I mean, that's what I'm in right now.
Right.
19, you know, I started at a marina in Bricktown, New Jersey, and I worked for them for 19 through 24. I went through college, went for network engineering, and then I went into that field for a while. But anyway, I went to corporate. They like ticked me off. Can I say pissed off? They pissed me off.
You can say whatever you want. Hey, you want to just bring that mic a little closer?
Yeah, they pissed me off. But anyway, and my brother Greg needed somebody on the boat. And I was like, my brother Greg, it's a long story. 2 of my brothers passed away. My brother Richard, who was the captain on the boat I started on, passed away. And my brother Greg became the mate. But then he had the opportunity to be a captain, and I kind of pushed him into it.
Yeah.
And I was like, Greg, bro, I'm sick of this like corporate life. You got a spot for me? Let me take it. He goes, don't let me down. I mean, you've been out of it for a lot of years. I'm like, well, how many years? 6 years? I was about 29, 30 years old when I took that position. So I went back fishing for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So I was fishing with them, you know. It got a lot easier because
how much changed?
We had like, instead of like 240 or 60 days, we had like 60 days full-time fishing, and then we had like 5 closed area trips, and that was it. And then you can day fish, but you had to be in within 24 hours and not over 400 pounds. So it changed, but like when I was 16 through 19, I was making like, I don't know, say I had a $3,500 check for 2 weeks, which isn't bad money for that age, right?
Yeah.
For anybody.
I was going to say you probably like buying cars.
I did. I paid cash for a lot of stuff. Nobody ever paid my way. But when I went back when I was in my early 30s, I was making $2,000 a day. No, I was making $1,000 a day.
Jeez.
So like we'd go on 10-day trips. So the trips went from 16 days to 10 days.
Yeah.
And this is like in the 10-year period.
Yeah, working less and making more.
Right, 10-year period. I'm making $1,000 a day, and we're only out 10 days because you don't want the scallops sitting much longer than that. They're best between, you know,
even when they're flash frozen, right?
Yeah. Well, you don't flash freeze them. You put them on ice.
Oh,
you just keep them packed
ice.
on layers of ice, and they're pretty much in a cryogenic state anyway.
Yeah.
So, but you don't want to go much longer, you know. But
and is that all just the pay was getting so much better because the price of them went up,
were
like
going
skyrocketed?
Up. Yeah. Well, So then I did it for like 5 years, between like 30 to 35. And my brother quit captain. He was just sick of the whole lifestyle, I guess. I mean, it was good money, man. I mean, I made 90 grand a year. He was making 140. But
Well, if he did that though for like 20 something years, he must, as long as he was smart with it.
He was kind of sick of the owners and stuff like that, and the crap they were pulling with him and like the crew and whatnot. But anyway, I was consulting, doing a computer gig while I was commercial fishing, because we'd shut down in the wintertime, and I went to Florida.
Oh,
so
nice. There you go.
I had the life for a while. So then I got out of it again. Went back to the marina that I started off at when I was 19, and I became the manager there. So I managed that for about 5 years. I left there around Hurricane Sandy-ish, like when we got inundated. I had just left the job, and then we got hit with Hurricane Sandy, and we were like ground zero up there and all that.
Yeah.
All the marinas in that area were just devastated. You know, you had 60-foot yachts just laying on their side. And
now, was that just a marina, or was it a boatyard as well?
Oh, boatyard marina. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I hauled boats. It was 10 acres. It was pretty big.
Oh, nice.
300 slips, you know.
Oh, there you go.
So that was a good time. I lived there. Oh boy, that's a whole nother story. But
Well, there's kind of like a marina culture. Like as much as I enjoy being out on the sea, I also have enjoyed some of the years where I've been sort of laid up in a marina, kind of waiting out the winter down south and everything. But you have to find the right place that has the right people in it and all that. There's a lot of things that sort of come into play, because some places they get sort of inundated with people who are basically doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And they can kind of change the vibe, if you will, of the whole experience.
They can. Yeah, well, being at the Jersey Shore, that was people's secondary homes. Like, they would buy a boat for quarter million and then put it in a slip. There was no property taxes. It's kind of like a smart move, you know. Half the boats didn't even move, you know.
Right.
They just chilled out, and we had picnic areas and parties and swimming pool and all that. So, but
that's not bad.
So getting off of my second stint of scallop fishing, I went back to the marina. Always been connected to the sea, you know. Except for when I went to corporate for a while, but. And then I left that marina around 2012 and then floated around a little bit, worked in mechanic shops and whatnot. But I decided, then I was helping my brother build his business, and I decided it was time for me to leave that. And none of my family were on the boats anymore. 2 were passed away. My brother Greg wasn't doing it anymore. My dad's been passed away for years. But I went back down, I walked the docks, and, my name got me a job on a boat again. So,
if you got that reputation, though, the sailing and any sort of, especially offshore work that you do, your reputation carries through.
Yeah, and my family's name, and, of course, they knew me. And, I talked to one of the old-time boat owners there that they own like the whole fleet down there in Barnegat. Like, they're all red boats. They're the Larsons own pretty much 24 boats out of there, and they're all either longliners, scallop fishermen, or whatever have you. Like, they do everything out of there. But
what can I ask you real quick with that? Because that seems to happen. You even see that up in Maine, where the fishing boats that there's some small ones, but it seems like there will be like one business that owns about 6 really big fishing boats, and it's like, they pretty much own the water up here.
Oh yeah, they've been building new boats for the past 10 years. Like, they're just pumping out new boats.
And is that just they've been in the game that long, and they've just been successful, and so they keep reinvesting? You gotta look at like real commercial fishing for scallops. Probably started in the 70s. When they were able to drop a dredge and retrieve it hydraulically. It's a lot to pull those. I guess it's not like hand line
engineer
cod.
That. It's like it's not like that. Like, it's a lot to engineer that and to have like the hydraulics that'll pull the gear back. Even,
right.
So and that's I think I mean you can like research it a little bit. It's like exact dates and stuff.
Yeah,
but, I mean, it's only in the 70s, from what I understand, is when it really became popular. Like, you can get a scallop permit back then. They were like handing them out.
Yeah, just like, good luck.
Like, here you go. Right? I mean, and at my age, they were like, when I was first, like, in my teens, they were like 35,000. Now you can't touch one for over $1 million.
Really?
Like, you got to like buy a boat that has a permit on it.
Yeah,
and you can transfer it over to another boat if you want.
Right,
So,
right.
you know, if you got in back then when the Larsons did, that's when they made a lot of their money. And this boat that my brother ran was brand new when he took it over in 1993.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, it has been the pride of the fleet down there for a while, you know. But I mean, that family's made so much money in the commercial fishing industry. Like I said, they pumped out new boats. I mean, and the next stint of my fishing, they put me on a new boat.
Nice,
you know,
nice.
So it was nice. But so the third time I went back fishing, it's like 10 years apart.
Yeah,
I went back to it. You know, I mean,
sometimes it's just ingrained in
you know,
you.
well,
You know.
You know, so I went back. They had a spot open. They put me out there, and then it was $2,000 a day. So like it was like so it went
How do you
from
even
like
say
it
no
went
to
from
that?
like
I know, right?
3,500 for like 2 weeks to, you know, 1,000 a day. So I was making 10 grand in a week and a half in my 30s, and then in my 40s I was like 42 maybe.
Yeah.
Might have been 6 or 7 years ago now. I'm 49. Yeah, so so I was making $2,000 a day. And now they're making like $4,000 a day.
No,
not today.
Oh,
Yeah, I turned down a couple of years ago. I had a opportunity because I know people in Virginia too, and they steam up and they hang out in New Bedford for the season because that's where most of the grounds are. It's closer up there than they have to steam out at Chesapeake,
right?
And even go to the Hudson Canyon area, you know. So I had an opportunity. The first time I turned it down. It was when I started here at TJ's Marina.
Yeah.
And they had, you know, I just got made like the head guy in charge here, and they gave me a couple $1 raise, and like I didn't want to let them down.
Right.
And I was like, I had an opportunity to make one trip, but it was like $30,000 or $40,000 for like 12 days.
Wow.
You know? And I turned it down. So anyway, I turned that down. I'm like, all right. I hope I made the right decision. And then like the next year, I got another offer for a full-time position, and the guys on deck are making almost $200,000 a year.
Jeez.
And the captains are making $300,000.
Wow.
Captains make like 5% over the deck share.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
you
yeah.
have all the breakdown and all that.
Well, and that's the big incentive to just stick with it, because you're gonna keep moving up that ladder if you want to.
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, some guys are just, you know.
Some people don't like that
just
responsibility.
want to be on
at
deck,
all.
you know.
Yeah.
Well, they were training me in a wheelhouse when I was 17. I got offered a mate's position, but it was in that whole area where I was dating and stuff like that, and I had already done back-to-back trips, so I was gone for 30 days.
Yeah.
And then I had an offer, 17 years old, to be a mate, because you run 2 watches. You got the captain's watch and the mate's watch.
Right,
and it's
right.
equally as responsible on the mate's watch. You got people's lives in your hand. You got dredges swinging over your head, and you're trying to avoid collisions because there's shipping traffic. And
Well, there's usually a whole bunch of you guys all out in one spot doing that
the
little
closed areas for sure.
that turn, man. I can remember watching them on the AIS,
Yeah.
and you know, I'd be like, all right, I think we're gonna clear, and then all of a sudden do a U-turn, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah, because I got to turn on the toe. But that's in the closed areas. For the most part, scallop fishing, if it's an open bottom, they're kind of more sporadic than in a closed area. 'Cause the closed area is a lat and longe of you cannot leave this border or you can forfeit your trip. So a closed area
And
shipping ground.
how big would that be then? That
Like
area?
say the Nantucket area was 40 square miles. But,
okay.
They used to only open it up for a certain amount of time.
So
years
everybody
ago.
goes.
So everybody'd have to go within a certain amount of time to get their catch. And it's only 18,000 pounds, and they record it at the dock, and you land it, and it's all... Because if you're over, they're fining you.
Yeah,
it could be
yeah.
thousands of dollars per pound, pretty much over your 18,000. You know, so you kind of want to come in under it. That's why you want to make
Just
your
to be
bags
safe,
the
yeah.
same. You don't slack on your bags. Make them all the same. Because every scallop that you put across the dock is money in your pocket.
Yeah.
So
You want to come out like right there at a hair's
pretty much
edge
like
underneath.
we would get within like 400 pounds, and that's not bad.
Yeah.
You know, that's 10 bags really. You know, 8 bags or something like that.
I just remember, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but so I used to go up to Rockland, Maine, and that was where I would haul out and I'd work for the yard and I'd work on the boat for the next trip. And There was one time I was going, and I would typically go north of George's Bank and then cut into the Gulf of Maine, because I always was like, man, the traffic down at the Great South Channel, it gets a little bit hectic, and I was like, I'm not going to do that, or whatever. The winds were whatever, and man, I went right through a scallop fleet.
Oh yeah,
in the middle of the night in a thunderstorm.
Oh, no.
Thankfully, it wasn't super windy by any means, but. And then, amidst all this chaos, there's humpback whales.
Oh
and
yeah, up there.
And I'm like, oh my God. I fired up my engine because I didn't want these things to, accidentally, be sleeping in front of me or ram me or anything.
Right.
I have a pretty big fear of these whales because when they come in real close, they're bigger than the boat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's a little different when you're on one of the whale watching boats, going out to see them. When they come and see you, it's a whole different feeling.
Yeah.
But I can you're watching them on the AIS, but you're also watching with your eyeballs, and you're so blinded by the lights because things
They're bright.
lit up.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, we had one trip. We left Barnegat Light, and for us, we're moving at like say 10, 11 knots, right?
Yeah,
that's as fast as they go. And to Nantucket Lightship area is exactly 300 miles. To George's Bank closed area was 360 miles. So that's like another, 6 hours.
Yeah.
It's like 30 hours and then 36 hours, day and a half. Steam from Barnegat Light, due east, right on the compass, due east. But one time we went out there and it was a heavy fog, and they had everybody else was out there fishing. They were all setting out. We're all like setting out at the same time, and we had a what do you call that? I don't know. One of them scientists came out with this that one time, an observer, right?
Oh, okay.
And it's like it sucks because you got to pay him $5,000 out of everybody's share, so you got to pay them to come out to do all their measurements.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we had this observer.
Seems like it'd be the other way around, man.
No, we had to pay them. So for them to measure the biomass, pretty much that's what they're out there for.
Right.
So we're just getting there after a 30-hour steam and day and a half, just like chilling out and eating food and stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So and it was a woman observer too. So she's up at the helm while my brother's trying to set out the gear, and I was there watching this whole thing, and she's questioning him, and I'm looking at the radar. I'm like, Greg, man, there's a lot of targets there, bro. And he's like setting out, and like you're at like steam and speed. They flare the dredges out and drop them back before they hit the bottom, and then you kind of throttle it back to like 4 or 5 knots.
4 knots, right?
And out of the fog came a freaking boat right at us, and our outriggers were out and everything.
Yeah.
So that guy was kind of coming across our starboard bow. And, of course, there's chaos and a whole bunch of expletives going on.
Oh,
and I'm
I'll
like,
bet,
Greg, turn hard to starboard, man. So he's like turning it hard over, and we just missed a head-on collision, but our outriggers clipped. And
well, so your boat's 100 feet long, but with the outriggers, what's the beam?
Boy, outriggers.
I mean, I look at the outriggers on that one.
Probably 40 foot on each side, and the that boat was like 32
so over
wide.
100 feet wide.
So 32 wide plus another 80. Yeah. So you're probably 110, and then whatever the boat had on the other side.
Talk about spatial awareness.
So like our outriggers clipped. His snapped off because it was steel and dropped down. And ours was like galvanized steel.
Oh, so it
hollow,
bent.
fluted. It snapped at the base, and then one of the stay wires. We were able to bring it in and lay it over our gallast on the back of the boat.
Oh,
strap
nice.
it down.
Save it, yeah.
So you're 90 miles from New Bedford up there. So like they were New Bedford guys. They're like, hey, come in, cut the outriggers off. You can pick them up later. Get back out fishing. Well, the owners of the boat were like, no, bring it back to Barnegat Light. Then we'll take them off here. Then you can go fishing. Because New Bedford, they can be a little shady,
I've heard it's a little rough and tumble.
It's a little cleaner these days.
Yeah,
but back then, it was like, you don't want to.
Well,
you don't want to step foot on there.
Sebastian Junger's book, he's the guy who wrote The Perfect Storm.
Yeah.
He's one of the lines in there. He's like, if Gloucester is the juvenile delinquent, New Bedford is the crazy uncle that's doing, life in prison
it's
for
crazy.
murder.
Yeah, it's bad.
That was back in the 80s.
Been there a few times, yeah. But, so we steamed another 30 hours back to Barnegat. and then had to steam another 30
All the way
hours
back.
back out. So we had
Just a
90
wasted.
hours of steaming. You know,
That gets a
all
little
told,
boring,
just
doesn't
to
it?
get fishing, man. But I mean, we spent the day cutting the outriggers off, but you know that's our stabilizer, bro.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
we were
you
taking
got the
a
birds.
gamble.
That boat
The
that big
divers.
will have the divers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh,
The
okay,
birds,
okay.
divers. You want to, yeah,
Yeah.
reference the same thing. Yeah, man. So then we went the rest of the season without outriggers, man, and that's
How-
kind
how-
of dangerous on that boat.
Yeah, how big would though? I've seen ones that are about this big, this long. The
That's
birds.
about it. Yeah.
Is that it? There's
Yeah.
about the same size for
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
How far down in the water do they plung those things?
Yeah, 20, 30 feet.
Okay, so way
Yeah.
down. Because when the waves are really rolling it,
Yeah.
that outrigger is going to be
They
picking
help a
up.
lot too, but they kill your fuel consumption.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
They help
You-
out a lot,
And you
so.
lose some speed no matter
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
right?
Well, the fuel consumption because you need to keep your speed up to tow.
Yeah,
you need
yeah,
to
yeah.
tow at a certain speed. But if you're steaming, I mean, you could probably because it's a displacement hull,
Uh-huh.
you're just burning more fuel. To,
Yeah, because
to
you're
make
just
the same
pushing.
speed.
Right, right.
They're hydrodynamic, so they
Same with this boat.
effectively they suck the boat into the water. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right,
Like if you
right.
think of the engineering of it, but
I've always kind of tried to. I toyed with the idea of kind of coming up with some sort of outriggers for this boat because when you get out at sea and in between the gales or in between whatever, especially down in the Southern Ocean, I found that the swell just stuck around and never went away.
Mm-hmm.
But in between those huge low pressure systems, there was always like a day of calm, like
Yeah.
no wind at all. And I couldn't even. A sailboat will normally leave its mainsail up in those situations, and that helps stabilize. But the motion was so violent that it was popping the rivets out of the mast track.
oh yeah, wow.
And the sails that I use are really, really stiff and strong. But I would have to drop that down. And now I'm going like 30, 35 degrees on either side. Now, I don't worry about tipping over.
Right.
It's like impossible in this thing. But like, it's pretty damn uncomfortable if you have to wait there for 20 hours and you're doing that. Everything
Okay.
down below is moving and making noise. It drives you mad. So I was kind of trying because you got the spinnaker pole and I got that boom, and I was like, man, I wonder if there's some way to
Listen, man,
stick them off to the side.
I had a trawler in here this past year
Yeah.
that actually put outriggers on his trawler. I think he's over in Dowry Creek.
Oh, really?
So he took 2.5-inch hollow aluminum poles, like 15 feet long.
Yeah.
And then he put a bracket on the bottom and screwed them into the side of his gunnel.
Okay.
And then he drops them down by hand, and he's got the bird strapped up on the gunnel rail, so that he'll drop them. I don't know. I was gonna. Thanks for reminding me because I'll check up with him a little bit, see how it works,
that
but,
actually works.
You know,
yeah.
because it's kind of the shape of a displacement hull. You know, those trawlers don't have a chine really; they're just rounded.
right,
And,
right,
so
right.
it was a really rolly boat, and they were trying to, engineer something. Somebody did it before, and they were trying to mimic it. So I don't know how it worked out. But
There was something. I saw something on YouTube or whatever about a sailboat because one of the other issues, like if you're in a mooring area or if you're anchored somewhere in a bay, and it happens out in the Caribbean in some spots where you get the north swell picks up, and the boat, this teardrop hull has a tendency, like it doesn't take much for it to just start moving, and it was something. But the birds work when you're moving forward. This is something else that you could like stick out the side so that it would just kind of stabilize. So it couldn't pull up or go down real easily in the water or something. I don't know.
Well, those
But-
birds are designed to stabilize you when you're still too.
They
If
are.
you leave them in the water, you just think about
that surface
the
area.
the surface area being pulled up on,
Right,
and it
right.
slows your roll anyway.
Yeah.
It's either that or you just get one of them gyroscopes in here.
Oh yeah.
$30,000.
Little power
later.
hungry
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
I've seen them though. Have you ever seen a boat with
A
those?
Seakeeper? Nah. Oh yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. We had that '66 yacht in here the other day. That
And they
has
had
a
it?
Seakeeper. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I've seen demonstrations done where they'll get a couple guys on the boat and they're rocking it and it's rolling, and they kick that thing on and
Yeah.
it's just like voop.
Yeah, Seakeeper makes trim tabs now too. I saw them last night. I was looking at a video where the trim. If you just picture stationary trim tabs, but these are active. They trim you.
They just do it.
It detects the level on the boat.
Yeah,
and kind of.
Well, the computing power now of a lot of this stuff, so the reaction times are
it's crazy,
ridiculous. As long as you got the juice, as long as you got the electricity, the battery power. I mean,
it's crazy.
That's one of the things that, in my estimation, sort of for what I try and do is like something I steer as far away from as possible. I'm always trying to not have to utilize any sort of electricity. I mean, on this boat, I'll have the AIS on when I'm out at sea, and I'll probably have a couple fans. And if I still have that kind of food, I'll have the fridge. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. Keep it real dead simple. And if I lose all that, I still have a sextant.
Solar on here or wind generator? I didn't know.
I have solar. Yeah, there's solar on the Dodger, and then I generate maybe 400 watts in perfect sunlight. So when I'm out at sea, 200 watts power, and that's for what I'm trying to use. I mean, I don't have any. There isn't any fancy. I don't use the GPS chart plotters or anything like that. I don't have any wind instruments. Keep it all super simple. That also keeps the cost of everything
for sure.
Way down.
Well, hey man, you have to adapt, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
But I mean, speaking of like electronics and scalloping, like when I was first like full-time fishing, we had a paper plotter.
Oh,
so
nice.
It was actually like a 300-pound steel thing that had a marker you had to replace once in a while, and it drew where you were going, where you went. Yeah, so there was no computers back then.
Right. That's almost like on the old school submarine movies where they're up there like highlighting it.
Oh, it's crazy, dude. And then when I went back to it 10 years later, that boat, had AIS finally. And I was like, wow, this is cool, but it didn't have didn't have boat name. Not everybody had AIS, and it was, if I wanted to track a target, I had to take my radar and then put my trackball on that target on the radar, however scale you were on, and then hit acquire, and then it would put it on a computer screen. Now AIS, whoever has it, you're seeing all the information that you need. Like we used to have to call ships and be like, hey, at coordinates, and back then was Loran too. Like we didn't go with Latin Lounge. We went with
container vessel. I'm the sailboat off your starboard beam.
At 7,200 460 east by 26 740. Yeah, it was.
I still have like all the old. Obviously I have a sextant, but like I have the hand bearing compass, so that when you see those lights at night, and you can. You don't have to because you got the AIS telling you what their name is, where they're going, how fast, what their cargo is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it really
that's pretty funny.
It makes solo sailing way safer because I can come down here, I can go to sleep for an hour or two.
I got you.
And not, I don't do that on, if I'm coastal within like 100 miles or 50 miles ashore and there's a decent amount of shipping, going up and down the coast, I never sleep in those situations. Right. So like if I was going from Maine down to Charleston, I would go north of George's, go south, cross the Gulf Stream, and within 2 days, I'm not seeing any more traffic.
No, well, I mean, you have your like approaches and your departure lanes, like the shipping lanes,
lanes because all that around Cape Cod, going in New York, going up into
Ambrose
Boston,
to New York, and then New York to Ambrose, and then you'd have New York to Barnegat, and then from Barnegat you'd have to Chesapeake and all that. So they're all like named shipping lanes. Yeah, and if you're outside of that, mainly you're not going to see a lot of intermittent traffic like that. But
no, and once I get off of the continental shelf, I don't see any of the draggers either. Oh, yeah. And then it's like sometimes I'll literally go 10 days without seeing a single thing. See satellites at night, and I'll see airplanes. Well, down in the Southern Ocean, I mean, I saw a container ship somewhere deep in the South Atlantic around the 40s, and then I didn't see anybody else toss 2 fishing boats south of New Zealand. Oh yeah, like 2.5 months later, and then 2 months after that, I saw one boat in Cape Horn, and it didn't come up on the AIS, and I was like, oh, so the AIS isn't working anymore. I was able to fix it. I had a spare antenna, but I don't know. I don't know how long that. But it doesn't matter because there's nobody down there. Yeah, I mean, there's some fishing stuff. I know the Japanese whaling industry is still a little bit alive down in the Southern Ocean, but mostly it's fishing boats in transit from New Zealand to like around the Falkland Islands. They'd go around Cape Horn. They go down to 61 degrees south, right next to Antarctica.
Oh, yeah.
Great circle route. Get over there because they're going for all the squid. I passed maybe 50 miles to the east of the squid fleet because it's real tight. And it was lit up like a city.
I saw something on
Crazy.
TV about that, where these boats would just go out there and they light it up.
Yeah,
you can see it from space.
Super halogen, like crazy, these big light bulbs like that. And they're, coated around the whole thing. And they just have these looping lines that are just pulling squid in because they're, I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Tasty treats. I've had them wind up on the deck every once in a while. I get that oil or that ink everywhere. Disgusting. Little bastards.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, I think I left out my last fishing adventure, but like I said, it was like $2,000 a day and whatever. It got even easier because then we had like 36 days of open bottom. And then like maybe 6 or 7, and then you had carryover days and all this other stuff. So you had about 110 days to fish total.
Well, so when you do open bottom, does that just basically drop down the frequency of the hauling it up?
No, open bottom means that like the government regulates how many days you can fish per year. And they do that by what tonnage is coming in, by these observers that going out. What are you catching? You know, what does the biomass look like? You know, so they do all these studies. That's why they come out. And then they judge how many days and how much tonnage that you can catch for the year so that it doesn't deplete the population, because scallops were almost fished out in the 90s.
Really?
And it's actually what's happening right now is that same thing. You know, I'm still tied to people that do it, and the population's declining, and it's, you know, it rebounded, and that's what they're hoping. I mean, it's not like gone, but like I used to fish like when I was in my teens, I could see home. You know, I could see the lights on Point Pleasant Boardwalk, right? Because we were like 7 to 10 miles off,
right?
But now, you know, I mean, it's crazy. There's so much that has happened. Like they allowed day fish boats, if that's 400 pounds. Like they were non-permitted for the longest time until April 2012 was the grandfather day, where anybody who got in before that was kind of grandfathered in. Anybody after that had to, after a certain date, had to buy a permit. And then they shut it down completely because it completely inundated the inshore. So it went from like 10 miles off, 20 miles off. Now you got to like burn half a tank for these smaller boats to get out there. Like a day trip for these smaller boats now takes, you know, a full 24 hours, where it used to take like we used to be able to do it on the big boat I was on. We had 15-foot dredges in like 6 hours, catch our 400 pounds. Now they have it so regulated, you're allowed to have like 600 pounds, but they cut back the frequency, and you can only have a maximum of a certain weight per year. Right. You know, so you have to pick and choose. Yeah, pick and choose your days that you go out. But open bottom fishing means, like, if the government gave me my boat 60 days to fish the open bottom, that's excluding the closed areas. I get 60 days a year to fish. If I go out 5 days, they charge me 5 days. If I go out 10 days, they charge me 10 days. So it works against that. It's a bank of days that you can fish on. And it starts after you leave the demarc line. You know, you call into the Coast Guard, say, hey, you know, I'm leaving.
Fishing.
Yeah, they can actually, now with AIS, it's kind of automated. So they have your day counter.
Right. Yeah. Because you're commercial, you have to have that thing on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I do know, I mean, there's a lot of times where I'm sailing, especially it seems to happen mostly up in the Gulf of Maine. I can see lights. I can see a boat. I don't see anything on the AIS till I get within about a mile, and then all of a sudden they turn it on. Or they go from maybe not like transmitting. I think some of them you can go into like phantom mode or whatever, where, because you don't, I would assume that some of these fishermen don't want to give up their spots.
Yeah, for sure not. Yeah,
you can't just broadcast that stuff out.
Well,
everybody used to have their secret black book of Latin law.
Actually, I have my deceased brother's black book at home still.
Do you have any wrecks in there?
Oh, dude, I mean, that's a whole nother story, man. Like, okay, I was like 17 when this happened, right? We were going out on a trip. We just rebuilt our dredges, all new chain bags. It was 5,000 per side. Snapped it all together. Spent a day and a half building this stuff. We go out fishing, right? So we're on one spot, And I mean, when you're looking for scallops, you're looking for scallops. You're dragging, right?
Yeah.
But there used to be books, wreck and hangs. Like there was none of this computer stuff.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you had to actually look in the book to see what you're towing through is
And
like,
know where you are on
there
the
are piles
chart.
of rocks. Is there unexploded ordnance? Is there a cable? Like you don't want to tow over that stuff. Right? Unexploded ordnance.
Well,
especially.
on all the charts of all the East Coast, that's like one of the biggest markings that you always see is like unexploded ordnance, this, that, and
oh yeah,
you're always looking at it in the beginning like, what the hell is that for? Why are they? And it's like, no, that's for people who are working that bottom, not for me sailing. You know.
So we were towing, and we were in one spot. So we leave Barnegat, and we were heading like inshore north. We were still fishing kind of inshore back then, and we were going from one spot to another. So the owner of the boat's like, "Hey, Cappy, I got this place called the Honey Hole, man. Let's just tow, let's tow between where we are. We're gonna just tow and just see what the dredges pick up between here and a known spot where he knew."
Yeah.
So we were towing in between, and all of a sudden the boat got hung up.
Yeah, just
and then it stopped us. So anyway, I think my brother was at the helm at the time. So we haul back the gear. He goes, "Yeah, look for holes because you don't want scallops getting out when you're dragging." So if you hung up, you might have tore the bag up a little bit. So anyway, I look over the side of the boat. He goes, "You see any holes?" I'm like, "Yeah, giant one. The whole chain bag is gone."
Oh no way.
So, but on the bottom machine, you saw this like 10 fathom spike, right? It was like just this, might have been like 7 fathom, just a spike.
Oh,
you had
really?
flat, and with a spike. So we were at least able to push like the red button, and that kind of marks our location where we lost a dredge or where we lost a chain bag. So we know not to tow in there. It wasn't in any of the books. So we held on to that. We held on to that number. Never towed around that area again, but we held on to that number. And I had the number like in one of my logs or something like that. And when I started working for the marina, I like 4 or 5 years later, I still had those numbers. And one of my customers was where they were deep sea divers. Like they went deep. They were breathing mixed gas and all that to get more bottom time. So I'm like, "Oh, hey, Tony, yeah, I got these numbers, da-da-da." And here's this like 22-year-old kid with these numbers that they're like, "Oh, yeah, really? Okay, kid, whatever." And I was like, "Oh, no, man. Like, really, I was scallop fishing. I was there. We lost a dredge. There was this huge spike." He goes, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll go off, you know." Yeah. He's got to burn his own fuel. So me and his friends and everybody, we went off, and we went off of our coordinates. So we had to find this again. So he showed me how to, like, drop a buoy and circle around it in different directions, and then drop another one, and then circle back around so you know where you've checked and all that. So we found it like on the 3rd try. So we found it in like a couple of hours.
And how deep was it?
20 fathom.
20 fathom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 20 fathom, 6 foot a fathom. 120 feet. Yeah.
Okay. So that's
so
deep.
It's 120 feet of water, and that's pretty deep when you're diving on.
Oh
there,
yeah.
So anyway, they went down. I was just chilling out up top. I was like gigging mahi.
I bet, dude.
Right?
I bet. Yeah, because it's probably a fish hotspot.
It was 20. It was, if you triangulated from Point Manasquan Inlet off a seaside, it was 20 miles offshore.
Oh, okay.
Off a seaside.
Gotcha.
Okay,
yeah.
Seaside Heights. So we go out there. They dive on it. They come up. I mean, they had freaking like 8-pound lobster. Doormat fluke like the size of this table. Like it was crazy. It was like it was Neptune's refrigerator, man. Like, sea bass, like giant sea bass. And I know, listen, man, this is decades later, so if there's any kind of infringement, well, I guess the statute's up.
Right.
You know, we rolled in with like a half a dozen giant lobster. It was crazy. And he described to me what it looked like, and it's on the Wreck and Hang book now, but there were a couple of clam boats that went down that were unaccounted for, and I think it was one of them.
One of those.
So, like, you know, there's a lot of clam draggers out of there, and they have like these like 16-inch tubes that blow water off of the clams that they dredge up. So a lot of those pumps are moving like thousands of gallons a minute. if it cracks, the hull cracks, clam boats sink like in an instant because they just suck in so much water. Like, there's been some clam boats that gone down because of that. So I think that might have been a clam boat. He said the wreck was in like three pieces, must have been tumbled around a little bit for some years.
Right.
And there was a big superstructure. They couldn't find the ship wheel or the bell. The bell usually has the
what
name
you're always
on
going
it.
for, yeah.
So they couldn't find the bell. But he said there was these big long steel tubes and big black rubber hoses, and I'm like, that's a clam boat. You know? So anyway, that was pretty cool, man. Like, it was cool that I had these numbers all these years later, and I was like, hey, you want to go out and check these numbers out? And they did. And they found it. It was pretty cool. So
it wasn't a Spanish galleon.
Yeah, no
I
kidding.
thought that was what you were gonna say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my last name's Scon, so it was like the Scon wreck. You know,
there you
like,
go.
Hey, man, we call this the Scon wreck. It's not listed as that, but that we found that wreck. But it was pretty cool.
Oh man,
you know, to be a part of that. But yeah. So I mean, you know, you've been at sea. Sounds like a lot of your life, or have been drawn to
Good
it.
portion.
You know?
Well, my adult life. I didn't
adult life?
I didn't
Oh,
really
okay.
start sailing until I was 18.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I got the late start. My old man was always a sailor. He started sailing when he was just like a little kid, and they used to. I think he started working on a boat, sailing from Gloucester up to Maine, like an old schooner. Like small one, like for guests of some resort or something.
Yeah.
But I think he started running that thing when he was like 16.
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
You know? So it was in his blood, and it goes back in our family to actually the phosphates trade back in the 1800s, where so all the agriculture in Europe was slowly just depleting because there's no fertilizer back then, and when they discovered all the phosphates and the nitrogen that's in like petrified bird shit, South Pacific's just loaded with. So they'd sail from England, go down around Cape Horn, go up into the Pacific, find these islands, mine it all, and then bring it back. And he did that for, I think, a good portion of his life. And one of the crazy stories is that he gets marooned. Basically, they had filled up the hold and they were headed back, and then essentially came across another island, and we believe it was either Howland or Baker Island, which are like just above the equator, way in the Pacific, and middle of nowhere. And so they left him and another guy to guard the island. And they were like, we're going to sail back to England and we'll be back. You know, be like a year or whatever. And this is just a bird island. There's only bushes. It's flat. It would have smelled awful from all the birds. And they spent 9 months there until another ship came, and they technically committed mutiny because they were like, we're not protecting this. Let's mine it all and go home. And even in his obituary, he was asked if he would have, he was asked about the mutiny, and he said, if I had the choice between prison in upstate New York and going back to that island, I'd go to prison. Yeah. Must have been pretty awful. But one of the trips that I wanted to do back in 2021 was kind of recreate, so to speak, his voyage, where at least I was going to sail from the States, but go down around Cape Horn into the Pacific and go to that island and then come back around. And that one, I unfortunately went through the eye of a tropical storm. God, I don't know how many days into that trip, like maybe 25, 30 days. And did damage to the foredeck underneath the bowsprit and all that sort of stuff. So had to
that's crazy.
Limp my way back in. Yeah. That one, though, I was only out total 75, 78 days, something like that, which for me isn't that much, but it's a different feeling when you're coming back like broken. Yeah. You know? So.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I tell you, I've been connected to the sea my whole life. You know, the first boat I drove, I was like 5. My dad was working on like one of these party boats, you know, and
nice.
He and the owner of the boat were good friends, so they were up there drinking Budweisers, and I was like 5. I remember this too. Like, we left the inlet, they moved the 5-gallon bucket over to the ship wheel, and they said, "Follow that boat." It was like a 90-foot Lydia,
nice.
You know. And I was like, all right, yeah. So I followed the boat until we found the fishing ground, you know, and here I am now again, like
still
working at a marina, you know. It's like, you know, I can't get away from it, you know. Like I said, I went to college for network engineering, computer science, you know. I did it for almost 10 years. Yeah. And, you know, it kind of burnt me out, but I love working outside. I love
Boats.
Boats,
Boats are cool.
the customers,
Yeah.
fixing them. I'm more, when I worked in New Jersey, I was more like management of the yard. So I did a lot of equipment operation, maintenance of the grounds because, we had 300 slips and like 12 people that rented buildings from us. And I had to do building maintenance
That's
and stuff.
big marina. Jeez.
It was, man. It was really cool, man. Actually, I was the pool boy. I mean, I became really good. We had a 60,000-gallon pool, so I became like the chemist.
It's not easy to keep those things crystal clear.
And the county would come in, and even though it was private, they'd check it every week.
Yeah,
and the dude said, "Rob," he goes, "your chemicals are the best at any pool I ever checked."
Really?
Yep. He's like, "Man, they're maintained. They're where they're supposed to be." I'm like, all right, sweet, man.
Good man. Good man.
I mean, I warn people, man, if you put me in charge of something, watch out. Because if you ask me to do something, I'm going to do it.
Get into it a little.
I'm going to do it. I'm just saying,
yeah.
like, don't have me in charge of something. And then when I'm calling people out, be like, oh, well, I didn't think you'd follow through on that, man. Like, I don't know, man. You ask me, I'm going to
Rob,
do it.
but we were kind of hoping you'd half-ass this one.
Right.
I don't think that's in your
there's
in
none
your
of that.
genes.
No,
right?
man. But you know what? Like, I try to, and there's something to be said, like, with hard work. Like, scalloping is the most brutal work. Like, when Deadliest Catch came on, I'm like, man, that's a farce, man. Put one of them guys on a scallop deck for a trip.
Yeah,
they're out for like 3 days, and granted, they're through some grueling seas, and tired and busting ice.
Dangerous.
But I mean, I got pictures of my brothers busting ice when we used to fish in the wintertime too on the Northeast, North Atlantic, and just the lack of sleep. I mean, even as easy as it has gotten for me, anyway. You still come home and you have to sleep for like a day and a half.
Oh, I'm sure.
Your hands are swollen because you cut like 500,000 scallops like yourself. Could you imagine?
You bent over,
Listen,
picked up heavy loads.
Yeah, a bushel of scallops is
God.
60 to 70 pounds each, right? And you're dumping them in a big bin, and then you stand there and cut them until they're gone.
Yeah.
So, and that's all you do.
All you do.
Pick scallops.
And the boat's moving.
Yeah.
And you got a razor sharp knife.
Take a hard job and make it harder when you got a sea kicked up. And if you're out there for 2 weeks, you're going to see weather.
Oh yeah,
there have been times where I haven't, but but so like it's given me the work ethic that out there you're your brother's keeper. Like, right. So there's like 7 guys allowed on a boat right now. You can't have any more. So you got
really,
Well, I mean, back when I started, you could have 12. But 12 guys can like eat through scallops. You can put them on the deck. They're going to cut them. It's going to decimate the biomass, and that's the whole thing with maintaining biomass.
Trying to keep that balance
to keep it there. So they cut the days back, and they cut the amount of guys back on a boat. So right now you have captain, mate, and 5 crew. Captain and a mate now usually will help cut the scallops or come down and help pick, but they have to pay attention to their toe, make sure they're not crashing in anything and stuff like that. And they'll cut too. So they might only cut half of what I'm cutting on deck, but like nowhere in my life have I worked next to a man that was trying to work harder than me, and I was trying to work harder than them. And this guy Nick that I worked with, like, he could pick a pile faster than I could, but I cut scallops. He blew me away picking the scallops out of the pile, but I blew him away cutting the scallops in the box.
Right.
But that was it. Like, we make the same money.
Yeah.
And then the same thing with the other watch. Like, the other watch would come out. I mean, you're tired,
like,
cranky,
how many? What's your number?
You're lucky. It's like, we're backing them up when we're coming off a deck.
Yeah.
So we would do overtime. So you got an 8 or 10, 12-hour shift. You're spending another hour or two bagging up scallops, icing up the fish, setting up the other guys. But we're all working harder than the guy next to, without killing yourself.
Right.
And it's like a true brotherhood, I find in other areas and other places I work, it's like not like that, and I expect like a certain level of people pulling their own weight, and I always find myself disappointed. Like here at this marina at TJ's, I am moving 100% of the time. If I have a 5-minute break in between jobs and I can go help out another customer with something I told him I would do,
it in. Yeah.
put my eyes on something. Hey, Rob, can you look at this? Yeah, sure. Just, if you're going to be here today, I'll come check. I mean, I did it all day today. My schedule changes all the time, but if I'm here, I'm moving and I'm doing something for the marina or for a customer at the marina.
Yeah.
And, and I'm going to work myself harder than the guy next to me because I want him to try to work harder than me. And it just doesn't happen.
It doesn't.
It's not like that anymore.
No, it's funny you say that because that's one of the things that when I was doing all the water sports stuff, I was so into that job, like managing a water sports center and having instructors and all these boats. And it's real dynamic. There's lots of stuff, and it's customer service. So you're trying to make the customers happy, but fix the boats, keep it safe, And I loved it. I'd work 10, 16 hours. It didn't matter. I was just having a ball. And like you, I was trying to be as highly efficient as possible, but I ran into a pretty big frustration roadblock when I would be the one that was doing that, and I couldn't get other people to really do that as well.
Yeah.
And I had great staffs, and I had awesome people that I worked with for sure. But it was really rare to find anybody that had that sort of mindset.
And that's likewise. I'm not putting anybody down because the guys here certainly work hard at what they do.
Well, and that was one of the things is that I realized that I couldn't ever hold people to that standard. Like I can hold myself to whatever standard I want because I know that, in the end, I always wanted to look back at like the end of the season and be like, ooh, baby, I killed it. Right. I killed it. I didn't have much of a life outside of work.
right.
So it comes with, hot and cold. But I don't know. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, work is just a different sort of thing. And I think if you don't have a passion for it, and it sounds like you definitely have passion for it.
I really do, yeah.
Because when you have that passion for anything you're doing, you're going to put way more effort into it.
You're absolutely right. And it becomes easy because it's not like a job, right?
Yeah.
But I was just, like that brotherhood out there, it's never going to be
unique.
It's probably, it is really unique. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. It's like, you got each other's backs out there. And boy, I've seen some, you're on a fishing boat for weeks on end with other men, and you're going to get into fights. I've seen some I've seen some crap, you know what I mean? So there's going to be some scuffles, there's going to be pissed off guys, you're tired, you're freaking achy, you're soaked. I mean, there's no, hey, let's wait till the rain stops. It's like, I don't care. I was just telling you there's waves coming over the side, and I was like scared shitless. And I'm like, all right, game on, let's go, right? The boat didn't sink. Oh, that's sweet. All right, give me more, right?
It's definitely tough because I don't know. A lot of that stuff I think comes out of non-communication or sometimes miscommunication. But like, it's true. If you jam a bunch of people into a small area in a dangerous and sometimes uncomfortable situation, it's like you're sitting here yelling at me. I got a rash on my ass so bad.
Like you don't know what I'm going through.
I'm working so hard.
That's funny. You're right. Yeah, that is funny, man. But put yourself in my shoes.
Yeah,
man. You
right.
Don't know.
Take it a little easy. Well, it'll be interesting. I'm going on this trip, and granted, it's only 5-6 days to get out Bermuda. But James, who has that other West Sail, he's going to come aboard, and we'll go from Beaufort here. Hopefully early next week if the weather window looks good. But normally it's just me. This is all mine. This is my layer. Yeah, I got to make room. I had to paint inside of these cabinets because they were all jammed up with like paint cans and stuff and all the rest. And I was like, well, we got to use that for James's stuff.
Yeah,
so.
and food.
Yeah.
Where do you stow food? Under the benches and all that everywhere?
These are all empty. All that's tools and heavy stuff. I try not to keep all the heavy stuff low. But those ballast. 3 are empty. Everything in the galley's empty. And then some stuff under here is, there's you can just pack and pack and pack and pack. So
yeah, well,
it's pretty crazy.
That's cool. Like, we'd go shopping. Like just say for the 7 guys. I mean, I used to do grub shopping when my brother Greg was the captain, and
I've heard about some of these.
Keep it under $2,000. It's like, all right, well, we definitely, because the crew buys the grub, like, so that gets taken out of the share. It's not like say you gross like. Say you net like $250,000, like that's the trip, right?
Yeah.
Fuel comes off the top. The
Right.
crew pays that.
The owner of the boat.
No, the crew pays the fuel.
So
it goes like 60-40 split. Owner gets 40% off the top.
Yeah.
60% goes to fuel, goes to food, goes to gear, like repairs and stuff like that, which is thousands of dollars because you're constantly repairing that stuff.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, and then what's left of that, the captain gets 5% off of that, and then the mate gets 3%, and then everybody, the 7 shares get split up amongst
everybody
shares.
else. Yeah.
So I mean, and that's been the breakdown forever. But
Since
so
the
anyway,
days of whaling ships,
and I was I was in charge of like grub for a while, and I keep it under $2,000, and but we as the crew who paid for it is like, the guys would be like, hey, Rob, make sure that you throw some Chips Ahoy in there, or hey, Rob, make sure you got this, or let's make sure.
Give me the
We're all paying for
Neapolitan
it.
ice cream.
Yeah, we didn't care. I got a story for that, but we didn't care because, there was always 2 steak dinners, one for each crew, or 2 for each crew, and there, and of course we'd eat the bounty to see while we're out there. It'd be like tails and steak, whatever, catch it a day, if you will, halibut,
but no scallops.
Nope. A couple of them might have fell into some bacon and wrapped themselves up, but a couple handfuls.
Don't let Skip see.
Well, we kicked them over. That's it. But empty shells, man. Fillet and release. That's it.
Yeah, right. Well, can I ask you real quick the size of the scallops? Because I've seen Murph showed me he's got this giant
call them platters.
shell. Oh, it's huge. Yeah, he said platter
plates. Yeah.
He said he used to catch those, a lot back in the 80s and stuff. Doesn't see too many of them these days. And is that, how old would have a platter been?
Now, okay,
so a scallop the size of a dinner plate.
Yeah, so right now, you're catching 20, 30 count. Say the shell's about 4 inches, and then you're going to see like 4-inch shells up to like 6-inch shells. Those pie plates, we had a whole trip of them up in George's Bank or Nantucket Lightship. One time. There was one time we were out there fishing, and it was snotty, man. It was like one of them times we were out in the wintertime, and we were getting beat up in the channel out there in the Hudson Canyon. And I said, Greg, man, didn't we used to like fish off of Long Island? I remember seeing like the Verrazano Bridge. We used to fish in the shipping lanes.
Yeah.
Or the edges of them, right? And so the next day, like, we're steaming. I'm like, where are we going? He goes, we're going up off of Long Island, because we would have been sheltered from the northeaster that was blowing on us. So we went in, dude, we were like 10 miles off of Long Island. It was like flat calm. It was beautiful.
Nice.
And what happened was my brother Greg looked at the plotter, and my brother Richie, who was deceased, 5 years before that had put a mark on the plotter that said seed. And seed meant scallop seed. So he must have made a tow through there at some point 5 years prior to that and saw seed. So they decided to try to see what the seed looked like. So 5 years later, we caught nothing but gaffers, we call them. U10 scallops, and they were in them pie plate shells.
Wow.
So in 5 years, it went from seed, which is, tiny
little,
up to U10s. Like the meats were U10, and the shells were probably 7-8 inch. Jeez. So in 5 years, that's how fast they grew.
Okay.
So that's a pretty good gauge right there.
So the ones you're normally getting now would probably be 3 years,
a year or two.
Two years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're, again, like one of the biggest areas is Hudson Canyon area, and the last time I fished it was probably 4 or 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
We were catching all like 20-30 count and 10-20 count, and that's anywhere in that range from like 4-inch shells to 5 to 6 or
5 and
something.
6. Wow.
And not to mention that the meats like between March and say August swell up. So you'll go from like in the wintertime, the meats shrink because the water gets so cold, the meats shrink up. It's shrinkage for sure.
Yeah.
When they shrink up, it takes 11 bushel you have to cut to make one bag. Now, when they swell up, it can be 7.5 to 8 bushel per bag.
Oh,
so you're like
that
3
much.
different bushel.
Jeez.
That's why you would want to fish your days now smartly in between March and August,
summertime,
because that's when the meats swell up.
Right,
so you get like a better. If you catch 100 bushel. In December, you're going to get 10 bags. You catch 100 bushel in, you do the math, 7. You're going to get 14 bags.
Yeah.
So you want to.
Jeez, that. I mean, why would anybody want to fish them in the winter then?
I'll tell you, when you had 200 days plus, it didn't matter. You fished all year round, but
all
now
time, right.
you pick and choose. That's why it's like such a game now. Like, when do we go? What's the best window? Like, what are the meats looking like? Like, are we going to burn up our days? You don't have infinite days anymore. So,
well, and that, I mean, for like you said before, trying to keep the biomass, to keep the ecosystem going,
right?
It kind of has to be limited. I know they've done a lot of good work where in certain places where the whole reef population is totally devastated. What they'll do is they'll start to just off limits some area,
right?
And then
no diving,
nothing.
No boat
and then
traffic.
after a couple of years, that becomes like the epicenter, the new nursery,
right?
And it spills over into the rest of the reef.
Yeah, I got you.
And then they're still able to catch there, but because they keep that one spot, and I mean, George's Bank is one of the most productive fishing grounds on the planet.
I've seen some really cool stuff up out of there,
insane.
man. Giant. It was like giant everything. It was like giant
basking
scallops,
sharks,
giant giant scallops, giant lobster.
What was the biggest lobster you saw? I mean, I've seen that picture of you, but
oh yeah, that one was like 12 pounds, right? My dad used to bring lobster home that were like 25 pounds. Giant claws, like the size of your head, man. Like the crusher claw,
right.
It was like the size of your head.
Golly.
And we were, as kids, we were like sticking pencils in their their claws and watching them snap in half and whatnot. Like,
I still remember my grandparents used to have a cottage up in Gloucester, and that was like my connection to the place. And when I was a kid, we went there, and that was one night, in our week-long stay, we'd always have lobster out of the house. But we'd go into that fishmonger right downtown, and in the tank this one time, they must have had about a 15-pound lobster. Yeah. And I was like, Dad, I want that one.
Yeah, right?
Just like
$300, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, I got some really cool pictures. I mean, still, a lot of the stuff from my teenage years I've lost, unfortunately. I mean, there are so many cool stories, like people that quit mid-sea. It's like, okay, we're going to call the Coast Guard. And they're going to do a rescue.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
So we throw you in an immersion suit and like toss you over, and then they got to come rescue. I've done it. We've done it 3 times. I've been on the boat.
It happens to people. They sometimes
get seasick, can't work, lose it. I mean, just
they can become dangerous too.
We've had to do that. Yeah, somebody hurt himself on purpose one time. We were like 60 miles. We were like 60 miles offshore, right? Like off of the Del Mar. And my brother's friend, who was out of Virginia, this guy left out of Point Pleasant Beach with us, and then we were fishing offshore somewhere, and it was nice though. It was like summertime, flat calm, and his friend Billy Wazalewski was coming in from a trip, but he was going into Newport News.
Oh, okay.
So this dude like hurt himself, and we're like, well, we're not coming in, but my friend's coming by, so we're gonna throw you over.
We'll get you a ride.
So we threw him in an immersion suit so he wouldn't sink. We weren't being total D-bags. And so the guys on the other boat were teasing him with a piece of rope. They're like, hey, and then somebody from our boat's like, hey, watch out for the sharks. And this dude was like freaking, I mean, that's so mean. I'm sorry. At the time, I was a teenager. I was like, all right. Well.
But, at the same time, they're putting everybody at risk when they just don't. If you hurt yourself to a point where all of a sudden it's like, oh well, now we've like got to steam back, or even if the Coast Guard has to come out in a helicopter and pick you up, there's still an element of risk for everybody involved.
Well, it cost about $10,000, and it cost the crew money.
Well, that too,
and it cost the boat, fuel, loss of fishing time, all that stuff. So you have to make that decision, and we do it with safety. I mean, it becomes an exercise. You know what I mean?
I had a friend of mine that was dropped off on St. Helena, down in the South Atlantic where they stuck Napoleon.
Yeah.
They were doing a yacht delivery from Cape Town up to somewhere either in the States or the Caribbean, which is usually about a 40-day trip. And he didn't get along with the captain, and the captain was like, well, we're just down right by this island. He left them with, the rule is essentially that you have to, if you maroon somebody or drop them off, that place, I don't even think they have an airport. You got to wait for a supply ship or something. But like, you have to give them enough money so that they can get home wherever their port is. Yeah. And so they did that. But like, you got to really, you got to rub somebody the wrong way to get dropped off on an island.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This guy went out of Point Pleasant and then went into Virginia. I don't think he had any money on it. All he had was a sea bag coming off the boat. I'm sure they made sure he got home okay. That's crazy. And like you see things like, okay, here's another mid-sea collision we had. We were red over red, dead. 10 miles of visibility doing gear work. Right?
Yeah.
Just flat calm.
By red over red, that means not under command.
Right. Captain is dead. Man. That's what they,
Yeah,
red over red, captain's dead. Okay, nobody's at the helm. So we were sitting still. Big blue boat, 100 foot almost. My brother was down helping with gear work, sorting out the gear, right? And I was down icing up fish while they were doing gear work, and all I heard was a bunch of yelling up top. I'm like, what the heck? I'm down there like 15 feet.
Here we go again.
Climb a ladder.
Yeah.
I'm like climbing up this ladder, and they put all the cutters and squeezers on the hatch, so I had to like knock it off. I hop out, I go up top. There was a double-masted sailboat under its own power, crashed right into the bow of our boat.
Really?
Yep. Whoa. It was crazy, man. And his mainsail went down. His main mast was snapped at the base.
Oh, that.
He was pissed, man. My brother said he was kicked up, reading the book, under power, and we were like offshore. He was under power, but it was like there wasn't any wind, man. It was a
so
one of them
just
days.
motoring along.
He was motoring along, not paying attention, and he crashed right into the bow of the boat, man. Toppled his mast, and
he solo sailor? Just him?
He was with his wife.
Oh, he was with his wife.
Yeah, so he was just yachting, and wasn't paying attention, dude. Like, you have a big blue boat. I guess it kind of might have blended in with the ocean and the sky.
If you're even keeping the smallest semblance of
it had a white top. The boat had a white top. Could have looked like the sea and a cloud or something like that.
He wasn't paying attention.
So he was pissed off. The whole report, the Coast Guard told us to stay fishing, and I remember the name of the sailboat. It was called Southern Comfort. They told him to go into Norfolk.
Yeah.
And so he did. And after that, I didn't hear anything about it, really. Right. Yeah. So I think the incident report was probably on his end. We filed one over the radio, and that was it.
It happened. Murph was out with his buddy Heath. I think they were scalloping. They might have been lobstering. And I want to say they were down south of George's, maybe. But dense fog, and they got hit by a container ship that was doing 18 knots.
Wow. Yeah, they're fast, man.
Threw him all over. They don't know how they didn't sink. Or no.
Them targets, man.
Yeah, I mean, and they,
they're cooking.
Thankfully, another boat was right there. They were able to identify the ship because the ship just kept going. And I think the ship had to pay for their lost time because they had to go in.
Yeah.
But I think,
nuts,
yeah. I mean, it's dangerous. Well,
I don't know.
Rob, we're well past an hour.
Yeah, okay, we can.
But this was awesome.
Yeah, it was cool, man.
I feel like if we do, because I love being here at TJ's. This place is great. I can't believe the boat's been here as long as it has without going in the water. But I'm glad we're getting her in. But this place, like, I definitely want to come back, man. And if we get another chance, I think we got to do a storm story podcast.
Okay.
Where we can just back and forth and we can set it up where it's like, oh, you think that?
Okay, that's cool.
Well, one time.
Yeah. I know you got him, and I certainly got him too, man.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's awesome, bro. Yeah, some good stories out there, man.
It's fun. It's fun to share them, and
sure.
people love hearing them and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So,
yeah, good.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, taking some time, and thank you for your hard work around the yard, man. It goes definitely noticed by me for sure.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah. I'll do it because I love it. So
there we go.
Awesome, bro.